Hello and welcome to the Leaders Council podcast with me, Joshua Jackson. This podcast is all about hearing from authentic leaders from across the country, gaining an understanding of the mindsets of the people that get up each day and make this country work. Today we're being rejoined by Roy Moed from LifeBooks. Roy, welcome back onto the show.
Thanks, Joshua. Great to be back.
No, it's going to be an absolute pleasure. I'm sure we're going to be having a very different conversation to the one you had with my colleague Matt a couple of years ago now. But if you wouldn't mind, can you just give us and give me and listeners a bit of a background into your company and what it is that you do?
Yeah, you're right. The last conversation we had, we were just entering into COVID, so that was quite traumatic for many businesses in the UK. LifeBook was set up some 10 years ago for my father to try and record his life story, so that I had those stories as he aged, but also, more importantly, to give him a project, something to focus on at a time that was tough. And during COVID, that was even worse, as elderly people were isolated and not able to see their families. But we've now done over 10,000 people around the world hold a private autobiography in their hand. And the whole idea is face-to-face interviews, not over Zoom or Skype or Teams. Because who wants to be crying and telling the story about, your son dying in the war or your wife passing away, or even laughing when the phone goes down or it starts buffering. So it's face-to-face interviews, which we then get professionally written and turn into beautifully handmade books, which last some 400 years. They're on archive paper and they're for the family. So we don't publish, we don't sell the books, they're just for the family.
They're just mementos of lives well lived, I suppose. And I can imagine it's absolutely fascinating talking to people and actually gaining that understanding as well. It must be quite nice for them and obviously for the writer.
I think there's such a breadth of stories, and they are lives well lived and sometimes lives not so well lived. Anything from sort of ordinary rock stars, if you can have an ordinary rock star. We had one guy just wanted one copy, all the way through to a tribute book for someone who dropped dead age 42 and his wife had two children. Well, she was pregnant and had one kid and they'd never know their dad, and she wanted that story told.
I can imagine that was actually quite special for everybody involved. I hadn't really thought about it from that perspective either, of giving it to loved ones that wouldn't know otherwise. So no, that's a really nice thing to hear.
I think what my father said in his book is that he was remembering things he didn't know he had forgotten. And with doing a private memoir at LifeBook, what people are doing is they're ensuring those memories. And it's only now, latterly, when people have done them sort of 4 or 5 years ago, and we're hearing that as they start forgetting things, they're kind of referencing them. They're going back to things, where did I meet my wife? Literally down to that, because as people age, they start forgetting these things. So you can't ensure your memory, but you can ensure your memories if you write them down.
Absolutely. And how long have you been running this business?
We started in 2012, my wife and I, this was my co-founder, and started it then. It's taken quite a while to expand into the US, and now we're in over 41 countries. We're doing them in Hawaii and in Mauritius and anywhere, because the actual system and the process, which came from my background in the airline industry and in process there, is something which is replicable and scalable.
Yeah. No, it's amazing that you're actually able to do it across language, across time, really. It's especially across time when you consider the subject matter and as you said, remembering things as well. But, obviously the last couple of years has been pretty challenging, and it was one of the main areas that you were talking about last time you were on, getting away from doing things digitally, getting away from Skype. And I am assuming that you dropped that as soon as it was possible to do so.
Yeah, we had about 47 customers who actually did it on Zoom, and we were very pleased. The oldest we converted was a 96-year-old in America who then got back in touch with his grandchildren. But there were a whole queue of people waiting for face-to-face interviews so that we could get back to the reality of it. And I think what you find is that everybody enjoys it. The interviewer is actually having a good time hearing fascinating stories. And then the ghostwriter, our professional writers, they are getting the chance to write a story in somebody else's voice. So it's got to sound like your dad or your granddad, but it's essential that the story comes out.
I can imagine that's quite the skill as well, being able to, envisage yourself as the person whilst also trying to remain true to facts and fun or seriousness, depending on what's been going on. And I'm assuming that now you've gone back fully to in-person writing, in-person meetings, or are you still, operating with that little bit of your remote work where possible and where requested?
Our core team, we were 20 people when we talked last. We're 30 now. They range from literally in Cape Town to Los Angeles. Those are our employees. Those are project managers, editors, typesetters, proofreaders, etc. They are all working remote except for 4 of them who come into the office now.
Okay.
However, the 300 or so ghostwriters and interviewers, they're local. They're local. The interviewers are literally within 30 minutes of the person giving the story, and they go and visit and face-to-face. And the ghostwriters are literally anywhere in the world, but, for example, our best American ghostwriter is in Rio. And it's important that you've got the same culture in the ghostwriter, otherwise you wouldn't get the knowledge. But what I'm really proud of with LifeBook is that we are effectively exporting this all over the world, because the printing and binding is handmade in the north of London. It's very much a British export, but with a local interviewer sitting in, as I said, Los Angeles or Hawaii.
Yeah, worldwide with that local touch, which is, especially when you're making something of such delicate value, really, having that quality to it must be quite nice for everybody involved. But from our side,
the British people trust the British sort of literary ability, even though my own's not great from my background. I shouldn't be in publishing. I'm dyslexic, but books made in the land of Shakespeare, printed here. Our editors are all English, even though we have to edit. American editing and English editing is different. But people respect that, and wherever we sell it in the world.
Yeah. And, one of the areas that we're always sort of amazed by, and part of the reason why we do this podcast and we work with business leaders and learn from business leaders across the country, putting people together, is so that we can take lessons from different people's experiences, the way that they, as I said, they get up each day, their mentality, their mindsets. Do you find that your writers, your team actually take lessons from those that you've been writing about as well? Or do you think it's a little bit more removed? How do you find that?
I think it's undoubted there is a huge learning, because a lot of our team are under 30. And, for example, may not have ever seen a black and white photograph. I know it sounds funny, but all of our books tend, because people are starting off in the 1940s, 50s, 60s in their life stories, the older ones of our clients, and they're all black and white photos, and they love them. And then they start to learn things which, we take for granted today, anything from a mobile phone to a fax machine, which is now out of date. But those people didn't even have fax machines. They didn't even have landlines in those days. One of our books is called I Come From a One-Tap Family. They shared a bath, each person in order. Bath night was once a week, and the person who's telling the story, he was the youngest, and he was last. He was the fifth to use the same bath water.
Yeah.
Well, you talk to people today, the youth of today, and they can't believe a story like that.
No, the rate of change over just 80 years really has been quite incredible when you think about it that way, isn't it? And some of the things we take for granted today, really would have been magic. It's always the saying, isn't it? Show somebody from 150 years ago a mobile phone, and it's indistinguishable from magic. But that's a really, really interesting point, and I'm glad you brought that up. Actually, for listeners actually thinking back to even their childhood.
One of our printers has on his website is, if you want to read the Magna Carta from, I think it's 1086, you can still go with white gloves. You can turn the pages. If you want to read a floppy disk from 1996, you can't.
Yes, that's very true. I can imagine it's far more difficult to find somebody to be able to read a floppy disk these days than it would
Yeah.
be. Yeah. I never considered that either. It's it's just showing my probably my age here of being slightly younger and just taking
That's
some of these
25 years
technological
ago.
changes for granted.
That's 25 years ago. It's not long.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I just about remember being able to use a floppy disk. Never mind anything else. But that's actually brings me on to a good talking point. You previously, when you were speaking and you came on, you briefly mentioned the fact that you have mentored people over your time. That you like to, pass on your leadership skills and your leadership ideals. Can you tell me what that involves, how you've done it, and why you like doing that?
I think I belong to this organization, YPO, the Young Presidents Organization, and part of that is giving back in terms of within the organization and mentoring some of the younger people. But what I was fascinated by is that everybody can be a mentor and can be a mentee.
Mm.
And what I mean by that is it doesn't matter, I'm 69 now. I can learn so much from you, Joshua. I could, in a conversation in the right environment, knowing what you could teach me and recognizing that you could teach me. It's not just because you're older than someone that you could mentor them. It's about life skills. And, the whole thing about the council is about leadership.
Mm.
And we achieve that leadership in different ways. So whether it's in a business life book or whether it's in some of the other things that I get involved in. I just did a little bit of work in Ukraine or on the border there. It's all about how you lead others.
Mm.
And I think that's the important part about mentoring is leaving other people with a way to understand the opportunities that they can benefit from if they open their mind to it.
Yeah, one of my sort of founding elements, founding principles, the way I sort of around myself and with the team is that nobody has a monopoly on good ideas. And I actually do think that's vitally important when you are having frank discussions and, somebody coming new into an organization or new into a group can strike on gold the same as somebody that's been there for 20 years or 25. I do think, having that open mind, shall we say, is important. It seems like you've got the same thing when it comes to, learning and the mentor elements and the back and forth there. So that's actually, again, quite impressive to be hearing. But, at the moment, I just want to take a bit of a deep dive back into before LifeBooks, you were involved in various elements of the aviation industry.
Yeah, I started a business in 78 after going to what I called the University of Life, the 29 jobs I lived through. I started that in 1978 with a friend and grew it to 600 people globally and exited in about 2007. But the life skills that I learned in that was dealing with what I mentioned before, the 7 plagues, everything that the world could throw at you in the airline industry, which was very tough. But it was that, and going back to your point about mentoring, it's not just about nobody has a ownership on good ideas, I think you said.
Monopoly on good ideas, yeah.
Yeah. But it's also not just the good ideas, it's the life skills. We each do the same thing or could do the same thing, and we'll take away something different from that. And it's how you apply that is the learning. And I think, you and I will see 2 things which are very similar, and we'll take away a different view on that and can teach someone else a different view on that.
Mm. Yeah, your independence and your own learned experiences, I think, is the term there. But when it comes to, obviously, I just wanted to go back. Obviously, you ran a business, in aviation. Aviation at the moment is going through some sort of tough times in the news and things as well. But to really focus on something that you sent over before we had a chance to record this, there was just a nice, interesting tidbit that you were talking about, no longer being stressed, not feeling things, the pressure piling up. And there was an example that you sent to me before we had a chance to speak, which is about flying a small plane in a race from Australia to England. That sounds amazing. Can you expand on that and what that taught you?
Well, I think the stress aspect is just, I think people are built differently and some people worry about everything before it happens. I I don't think I think about enough things to worry about them, if you know what I mean. I wait till it happens and then I try and find a solution to it, and then it isn't a problem. I believe if you try to find solutions to all the potential problems that could go wrong, and flying in that race was one of those things. There were 35 aircraft. We flew from Biggin Hill in London to Sydney in Australia in a race, and there are lots of things that can go wrong, from weather to fuel, to not having fuel, which we didn't have in Calcutta. They stole all the fuel. We had to buy it again. But the problems that can go wrong, if you're prepared, if you're trained, if you've got a well-maintained aircraft, you can only deal with the problem as it hits you. And I think being able to be calm enough, and I love the British Airways pilots' voices. They make you calm in any situation, so matter of fact.
Yeah.
And I think just looking in a situation like that, and there was a father and son who had a fight in the plane on the way to, I think we were in Egypt, and they turned the aircraft upside down in a hailstorm because the father was the private pilot, the son was a commercial pilot, and the father was telling the son what to do, and they didn't agree. And fortunately, they landed safely in Hayil in Egypt, and decided to give up the trip to Australia and went back. But it just shows you it's not about that experience, about the self-confidence.
Yeah, no, it's that's an interesting one, isn't it? That they've argued there and turned back, but I'm assuming you managed to make it successfully.
We did. We got all the way. It was fascinating, and I look back at it now, and I used to be scared of flying to Deauville or Lutuke because you were flying over the sea here, and you're standing on the beach in Bali, and the next place is Phuket, and you've landed in Myanmar, which you had like 8 hours to get out of because it was the military procession was the next day, and they were shutting down all these incredible places, flying around Ayers Rock in your own little aeroplane.
Yeah.
It was a big boy's adventure, but it was a lot of responsibility to getting it right and not panicking.
You've just reminded me of a really great book that I read last year, The Moth and the Mountain, about an English chap who decided prior to the first summit of Everest to fly in a little Tiger Moth, the double biplane, and went from the UK and pretty much crash landed on the mountainside at Everest, and then decided to try and summit it. I won't tell you whether he was a successful summit or not, but I can guarantee it wasn't the first person to successfully summit. But a really interesting story if you do want to sort of potentially relive some of those days. But I really now want to just touch on, you sent over a favourite quote as well by Maya Angelou, saying, if you're going to leave a legacy, make a mark on the world that can't be erased. And that, you said it resonated with you. It was something that you are now thinking about, and obviously ties back in to the work you're doing with LifeBooks. And can you just expand on what that sort of means for you and why?
Yeah, so when I started, I used to do a little public speaking called Inspiring Your Parents, a project to live for. And because that's why I started and gave my dad a project. And with many people, especially during COVID, it was about having a project, and a number of terminally ill people do their life books because it actually gives them something to focus on, which is not their death. But moving on from that, I started looking into why people were doing their autobiographies. And a lot was about having that legacy, leaving a mark on the world that can't be erased. And the importance for people is to actually know that it doesn't matter what their life was, that it meant something to them. So I've adapted my presentation now to the value of legacy, not money. And Maya Angelou's quote is perfect for that. But a lot of that presentation comes from the fact that we're all going to have a legacy. It doesn't matter whether it's you, me, a company, we all have a legacy. And is it one that you're going to be happy with? And do you ever stop to think what your legacy will be? And my presentation goes around the fact that Alfred Nobel in 1888 was in Paris, and his brother died, Ludwig, and he saw the obituary for his brother, but they thought it was him. And it said, Le Marchand de la Mort est mort, the merchant of death is dead. the man who was responsible for killing more people than anyone else, has now died himself because he was the inventor of dynamite and gelignite.
Yep.
And he thought, my God, that's going to be my legacy. And a few years later, he took his whole fortune and he created the 5 Nobel Prizes that we know him for today. And there was a man who had an opportunity to see his legacy and changed it. And I always, in my presentation, what I talk about is the fact that my legacy was going to be airline food. And I don't think I really helped many people through that. And I've changed it now to the 10,000 people around the world who are holding a LifeBook in their hand and a memoir.
That's a really nice spin, isn't it? To actually reassess your aims and your life through the lens of the future. And, you've managed to turn around and actually provide something of value to so many people that, is quite unique. It is, it is unique. There's nothing else to say about it. But just as our sort of time draws to a close here, Roy, what have you got coming up? What's next? Is there a next, or is it just continuing with LifeBooks, moving into those new markets and giving people the opportunity around the globe to tell their story and hold on to that piece of history?
I think as an entrepreneur, the problem is there's always the next. There's always something crowding your mind. There's always something you're seeing that could be done better. And I think one of the things at the moment that I'm noticing is that the food banks that are popping up in the world, in the UK, and the need for food banks, and is there a better way to do that? But that's at the back of my mind, and it's something, when I'm in the shower, I can think about. But my goal really is I want to be doing thousands of these LifeBooks around the world, and I want to be providing that legacy for families. And to me, you can't do better than that. And I don't, if I have to stop now, if my life ended now, at least I know that that's happened. And I'm sitting here in our library where we've got copies of every one we've done. And I look at the titles and I just smile because my favorite one is Looking Back in Embarrassment and All My Sins Remembered and things like this. And people are very humble with their titles. It's very good. So
that's nice. It's and long may these books continue to be produced, and long may you be able to look into the library and have a little chuckle at some of the titles as well. But Roy, if anybody's interested in finding out more about LifeBooks, where would they be going?
LifeBook UK is our website, and you'll notice we got 3 packages. We got a Royal, Imperial and Signature, and the image on the Royal one is my wife, Yvette, who's my co-founder. It's her wedding picture, which we used as the jacket of that one, and I guess that's part of our legacy as well. So
Absolutely.
It's LifeBook UK.
LifeBook UK. Well, Roy, thank you ever so much for coming on today, and it'll be great to again have you back in once maybe you've thought a little bit more about that food bank issue and your next steps as well.
It'll be a pleasure. And thank
Brilliant.
you, Joshua. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you.